We've been posting on Facebook there. I'm not sure who started that Rockville community site, but I've been posting a little bit on there for any of you that have seen that. And as I've always said before to people, I try to give factual information and I show you where I got my information, and I'm open to having anybody change my mind if they have different information, share it with me. As you know, that I don't even live in Rockville anymore, but I still have my apartments here. But the way things have been going, we need to have some things straightened out. A 19% tax increase, and then the high water and sewer rate increases is just too much for people. And in my research, I had found Tom Funk here. He's currently the mayor in Victoria, Minnesota, and he had did some similar grassroots efforts as a watchdog of the community there, and got people together. And I don't know, maybe you can share from there. He's currently running for a state senate seat down there too, but after talking with him, he was willing to come and talk with us and maybe give us some direction as to how we can get things back in citizen control here as far as I'm concerned. He was offering to help and come up and speak with us, and I was all open to, hey, any help we can get, we take it. So why don't you give us a little more of your background? And
Sure. Well, I've got a 3-hour speech prepared.
No, wait a minute.
Let me kind of set to me what the ground rules are real quick, and that is I am a conservative and I am running for the Republican endorsement, but what we're going to talk about today is nonpartisan. This has nothing to do with Republican or Democratic politics. To me, this is all about good government versus bad government. The effort I led in Victoria involved about 40 residents. It focused on the Open Meeting Law and Data Practices Acts, and it was really tied to, in Victoria, building a new city hall, a new public works building, and then what ended up being a commercial rate apartment building called Victoria Flats. So I'm not up here to pitch my Senate campaign or talk about politics, but I really want to focus on some of the things that we did, what we ran into, and maybe some of these experiences could help you, because I think everybody benefits from completely open and transparent government. And the Open Meeting Law and the Data Practices Act are our tools as members of the public in order to have access to the information so that we can research and form our own opinions on any of these issues. Let me just, I really don't have any prepared remarks. I'm really here to kind of help share some of the experiences and lessons learned. And I'd really like you folks to kind of drive where this conversation goes. I will tell you that in our particular case in Victoria, the taxpayers of Victoria lost about $7 million because of what I would describe as backroom deals with the people that have run the city of Victoria for decades. Money lost that went to, there was a small group of insiders that really kind of ran the city. And I think there's one snippet of information that I can kind of share that kind of gives you really in essence what we're up against. And this was the very first closed meeting that was recorded. The meeting law requires councils to record their closed meetings. And then in this closed meeting, there was staff and the same people that were found guilty of intentionally violating the law, the 4 council members. In that meeting, the people were talking, the senior staff and the council, and a particular individual that really owns about 80% of the downtown commercial property. The statement was made in this meeting that said, the individual doesn't want the parking garage now, but they'll tell us where he wants it. And that's an $8 million price tag to build a piece of, to condemn people's property, take it, and build the parking garage that he wanted. And what's astounding to me is when you listen to this video clip, nobody questioned that was how it was going to be done. This is an example of how bad it was in Victoria as to what was actually going on behind the scenes, right? So I think there's one other interesting piece of information that you folks may find helpful. It took about 7 years from the time I first started working with residents and investigating the city to the point where we really, in my opinion, transformed Victoria and all of the backroom deals. And, if you will, the good old boy network is now done. And as recently as this year, I just started my 4th year as mayor in 2020. But literally in 2019, we just finished cleaning up some of the last pieces. So this is not a simple thing. It's not something that's going to happen quick. But as part of this process, throughout that entire time, I was attacked by the local media. I was attacked by the people that supported them. I was falsely accused about everything under the sun in order to kind of discredit the message and what I was talking about. And this is something that if you get active and you get involved, the pattern of behavior, you guys are going to run into that. And so they're going to do everything. The people that don't want you to dig, they'll do everything to try to discredit you. I think it's interesting to note, and this is kind of the last comment, the trial judge, after a 6-day trial, and in her written ruling, and for those that aren't familiar with these kind of things, it was rather astounding she put this in the ruling. This is a direct quote, and she said, quote, "The defendants profess their ignorance of the open meeting law to the degree that this court finds shameful in regards to their duty to the public." The judge then went on to say, the open meeting law is not written in some arcane legalese. It's something that the average citizen can read and understand in a matter of minutes. It's literally about 2 pages. It's got 5 or 6 or 7 requirements. This is not hard. This is really simple stuff, folks. And in Victoria, our case, the plaintiffs believe we had 92 intentional violations of the law, 38 of which were assigned to the individual council members. So let's get to the heart of the matter. One of the best things that you can do is simply read the open meeting law. It says what the requirements are, and you should demand of all of your elected officials to comply with the law. It's very, very simple. The other thing, and the most powerful tool we had, was the Data Practices Act. That allows you to submit a request for information to your city government, and they'll be. You guys a statutory B city?
Yes.
Okay, it's a statutory B city, and I can't remember. I can't remember exactly what the title is, but the city should have somebody identified.
Responsible authority.
Thank you. Responsible authority. You submit the data request to them, and typically you'll have, they can have up to 30 days to provide you that information. The key about that is they can charge you money. And this is something that was, when we were doing our investigation, they tried to charge us pretty heavy, exorbitant fees to the tune of like $1,800 trying to get information. One of the things that we learned that you could do is you could go and examine the documents or the information at City Hall without having to pay those fees. But they do have the ability to charge you, before they do it, a reasonable fee, and there's a lot of iPad opinions on this, a reasonable fee to collect the data, and then if you want copies made, they can charge you the copying costs. So you have to dig into it more, but I guarantee you, in our case, what happened is we had friends that weren't known by our opponents that actually did some data requests, and some of the biggest smoking guns we got were from those data requests. When we went through the trial and went through discovery, lo and behold, documents disappeared, right? This is the real one, folks, right? It's not like Perry Mason. In fact, in our case, we actually, at trial, had elected officials admit to destruction of data. We actually had it recorded. So, why am I sharing all this? It's not like you see on TV. It takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. Individually, I guess, over probably the most intensive 3 or 4 years of this, I probably spent nearly 3,000 hours of my own time digging in, reading documents, figuring out what the questions that we needed to ask. And there was a group of about 40 of us, and a lot of them spent a lot of time digging into data. It's the data that doesn't lie, right? It's the documents and understanding the law and understanding how you can use them to get to the information you want. So with that, let me kind of step back. That hopefully gives you a little sense of what I had to deal with down in Victoria. I'm not, and let me be clear here, I don't know the circumstances here in our city. I don't know if you have the same kind of issues, right? I know that there's concerns about some of the decisions being made by the council and some of the taxes, right, and the increases. But if you have questions about that, you should have rights to any piece of data that you want that's in the city's possession unless it's specifically prohibited from public disclosure, and that's usually personnel information or some limited types of data. So with that, let me step back and say questions. These are things that I can help you guys with. Guys and gals, that is.
Lawyers, do you have to have lawyers involved?
Yeah, in our case, because of what I do for a living, I was connected with a bunch of attorneys out of Minneapolis. And the attorneys don't want to, there's a golden rule out there, you never sue government because you never win. In this particular case, this started with a law firm by the name of DLA Piper, somebody that I've done a lot of work with, and they, if I'm not mistaken, they do the most pro bono work in the world. All over the world. It's an international law firm. What happened in this case is I put together basically a 28-page summary of all of the information and data that we had collected, presented it to them. They took a couple of months to review it with the senior partners, and at the end of the day, they said, this is in the public's best interest that this go to trial, and they took the case pro bono. So that said, there are attorneys that specialize and will take these kind of cases. Eric Cardall is one name that comes to mind. Highly respected, very good attorney. And there's others that you can do this. The cases, it was so bad in Victoria, it was so prevalent, the case was so large. Like I said, there were 92, in our opinion, 92 violations of law. In most cases, you're going to find 2 or 3, right? So there's a significant difference in the size of the case. I would suggest if you really think there are issues, and I'm not saying there are, right? But if you think there are issues, you need to find an attorney that will help support you in it. And if you've only got a couple of issues, it's a much easier thing and doesn't take as long. Right? Our case took so long because it was so big.
How big is the city of Victoria, and how many council members do you have?
So it's a statutory being like you guys. It's called a weak mayor system. What that basically translates to is the mayor doesn't, with few exceptions, has no more power or say than a regular council member. And so there's a mayor and 4 council members. The city manager basically runs the city. Think of the city manager as a chief operations officer. All of the staff report to the city manager. The city council can hire or fire the city manager. The city council can hire or fire your city attorney. Everybody else works for the city manager.
Same in Rockville.
Yeah. It's probably, statutory B is probably, what, 870 cities, give or take, in the state. I think statutory B is probably the most prevalent form. When you get into big cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul, St. Cloud, they're typically, I think, charter cities in which there's different rules, right? And those would be strong mayors for the systems. The older, smaller towns are probably statutory A, where the council and the mayor, staff, all work for the council, and they have a much more active role. But this is typically smaller cities. Victoria itself is over 10,000 people now. In 2018, we were the fastest growing city in the state in terms of percentage. We grew at 38% 1 year. So the growth is not slowing down at all in Victoria. Other questions?
In your opinion, would it be beneficial to have a larger city council? We had 7 at one time, and I won't get into it, but anyhow, now it's 5. And that includes the mayor. So, if one person is missing, you've got 4 people to vote on something instead of 5.
Well,
I personally would like to see it go back to 7 council members.
if you
I
had,
think it'd be from different areas, and I know we don't have wards. I wouldn't know how to go about doing that, but I believe it would be beneficial to have more people on the council.
so Victoria is the same in the sense that we have 3 precincts in Victoria, but council members aren't elected, 1 from each precinct and 1 at large. Everybody could be at large. We technically, and actually this is true, when we filed lawsuit, my neighbor was on the council, and 2 doors down was one of the defendants in the council. So, I mean, you can literally, it's possible to have them all in one neighborhood. If I understand the history, wasn't it a township and a couple of cities all merged into one?
Yeah, Rockville Township and the Pleasant Lake, city of Pleasant Lake and the city of Rockville.
So, since you have a council of 5 now, even if you had a council of 7, if 4 could vote on it, even if everybody was there, 4 is still a quorum, so 4 could still vote. I don't know why I don't know the history. I don't know why the decision was made to go from 7 to 5. I think that's something that the people that's something for the people of Rockville to decide.
It was a voter referendum question.
Oh, so it wasn't on the ballot?
Yeah.
Got it. So, yeah, those kind of structural changes, frankly, I don't know what the law is, but it wouldn't surprise me that those kind of structural changes would require a vote of the public. Specifically because they're so, that kind of a game changer, if you will. So, one of the things that you bring up an interesting point. A lot of times there's questions about why certain decisions are made. This is where the Data Practices Act is so important. You should be able to get access to all of the emails and other things that show the communication. One of the biggest problems we have in Victoria, and it's prohibited by the open meeting law, is called serial communications. So does everybody know what serial communications are? Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's just say we have a council of 5. Quorum is 3. Council member A talks to B, B talks to C. Right? B has now created a serial communication. Now A and C don't know it, but B certainly does. Because if you're talking about an issue and trying to decide how you're going to vote in a council meeting before the public, that you create a quorum, and a quorum has got to be noticed, and you've got to be talking about that in public. What was happening in Victoria, the way they did it, is A and B would decide, and A would talk to C, and B would talk to D, right? But when you start looking at the communications and human nature being what it is, as we got their phone records, we got their texts, we got their personal emails, because we knew they were taking care of city business with personal emails. As soon as we did that, you can put the 4 dots on the map, and you see everybody's talking to each other, right? And that, what was happening is major decisions that came out in council meetings in front of the public, in which millions of dollars could be at stake, or significant structural changes, anything that the public has a right to hear the elected officials discuss and talk about. All of a sudden, instead of maybe an hour-long discussion or a work session, what happens is you've got a 5-minute discussion and a vote, boom. And it's like, what just happened, right? That was some of the indications to us that there were problems in Victoria, because we saw that. And the one council member who was not named as the defendant would tell us, he would come to a council meeting and be presented with stuff right there at the meeting, had no clue what's going on, and there was a vote with virtually no discussion, and spending millions of dollars. That told us that there's a problem. The other thing that happens is, when this kind of behavior is going on, it's really completely ignoring the public's right to know. And to give you an example of how this has shifted in Victoria, and this is something maybe you want to look at. Prior to what happened in Victoria, there were probably, I mean, it varies by year, but there may be 8-10 work sessions where council would have a work session before a council meeting to discuss issues that are facing the city. That pattern continued until my third year, until 2019. So I've been mayor 2 years and 3 months when, give me a minute, I think the context is important here. So I got elected, I wasn't supposed to get elected, right? I wasn't part of the system. The first 2 years on the council, 2 of the council members were defendants. So the same people I'd sued were on the council with me, along with an important person they appointed to fill a vacancy. And so it was a very hostile council, to say the least. One individual that got elected with me to try to reform the city, it turned out, and we didn't know this until March of 2019 when we hired a brand new city administrator. Remember, in 18 there was another election. They were then gone. They got their people back in, but these people were focused more, let's try to do the right thing. We hired a new city manager. In March of 2019 was the first time that myself and Councilmember Gregory, who got elected with me originally, started receiving the same information that the rest of the council received. So this is important, folks. Talk about elected officials, staff are just, if they're bad, if they're not focused on what the right thing is for the public, are probably even more dangerous than the elected official. Elected officials you can vote out. Staff you can't get rid of. I'll give you an example. Lois Lerner in the IRS, right? She used her position for her political agenda. I don't want to turn this into a Republican-Democrat thing. That's not what it's about. The point is, the first 2 years and 3 months that I was the mayor, staff had constantly undercut us. And I'll give you an example of what happened in March of 19 when we got a new city manager. She used to be this assistant city manager of the city of Burnsville, a city of about 60,000. She knew she did the right thing. She came in. She was focused on what's the right thing to do for the city of Victoria and for the residents. Put a new finance team in place. In 6 months, 2 department heads were fired because they were exceeding their spending authority. One was fired, all of a sudden the contractor came in and said, "Give us 15 grand." They were doing up to their spending limit, submitting their bills in the old system, and the way they got away with it is they would stay under the threshold. Another one came in and said, "Sign this $40,000 contract." Well, the city manager in Victoria, the city manager's authority is limited at 10,000. Statutory B, it's 20,000. The city council can lower that. The city in Victoria had done that. The individual said, "Sign this $40,000 contract." Dana Harding, our city manager, said no. He says, "That's the way it's always done, we do this." She said no. 2 weeks later, he was gone. The new finance team found roughly $2 million in accounts that for 2 years and 3 months, Gregory kept hidden from Gregory and I. Guys, this is all staff, right? If you don't ask the right question, right, you don't know what's going on. And this is going to be part of the problem that if there, and I'm not saying there are issues, but if there are issues there and people don't want you to find it, they're not going to make it easy for you. And this is some of the things that I've experienced with some of the other bureaucracies that I've had to deal with, including the Met Council and League of Minnesota Cities. We are a member of the League of Minnesota Cities, and because I led that open meeting law effort, they wouldn't provide me as a mayor of Victoria information that I requested, even though I was a member of the league. So I've actually met with their general counsel and some of their lead attorneys, and we've had some very, shall we say, frank discussions about the open meeting law. In fact, what they are doing now, they defended people in Victoria all the way up through the Supreme Court, and they now are proposing, along with metro cities, changes to the open meeting law to make it harder for the public to follow what's going on. Specifically, they're proposing changes to allow councils to go into closed session to discuss real estate strategies without having to identify specific properties. And that, to me, I think goes against the very nature of what we want, which is transparency. So is that kind of helpful? And guys, this is, and hopefully you're getting a sense that this is not an easy thing. It took a heck of a lot of time and effort, a lot of people involved, but to me, the outcome was well worth it. In Victoria, all of that backroom deals, that's all done, right? All of the excess spending, I found problems with our credit cards that were being used by department heads. I found other excess spending that was wasteful. All of that's been stopped in 2019 once those other two were off the council. So It's just something to keep in mind. It's a long process. More questions?
Is there a statute of limitations on how far you go back, or how current does it need to remain?
So there's two arguments. The statute of limitations, if a law is, by the way, I'm not an attorney, so I'm telling you my understanding. If an attorney argues and says it's different, leave the attorney. My understanding, the statute of limitations is 2 years in Minnesota unless the law specifies something different. But there's a concept called tolling. And what tolling is the statute, the argument is, and I think it's valid and I think it could be used, if the information's held from the public to begin with, so that you didn't know that there were violations, they can't then say after 2 years, hey, statute of limitations hasn't expired. Once you're aware of an issue or you're aware of violations of the law, then the 2-year time period starts. And this is this concept of tolling. If you knew, or if you didn't know, they can't use the fact that they hid it from you as a defense and say statute of limitations is gone. But once you know, and if you do nothing, then in 2 years, there's nothing you can do.
So the 7 years that you said it took you to actually move toward resolution, so the 5 years prior to the 2 years didn't count, kind of thing, or?
Right, well, so let me kind of help. My involvement from beginning to end has been 7 years, but a lot of that in the initial stages was trying to figure out what was going on. And that started really in November of 12, and then it wasn't until May of 2013 where the first lawsuit was filed, and there ended up being 5 lawsuits filed. So that process, that took 18 months or so. Then from the time that the lawsuit was filed in May of 13, there were 2 more filed in January of 14, 2 more big lawsuits because we found that much more. And then they were all combined, and there was all the legal maneuverings. And then it actually, through delays and other things, we ended up having a 6-day trial in November of 15. Hang on a second. I may be off a year. It was November of 15 when we had the trial, and we got the judge's order in March of 16. I can't remember if it was filed in 14. I think the first lawsuit was filed in 14, not 13. Yeah, it was 14. I'm sorry, it was 14. And then the first part of 15 is when the next 2 big lawsuits were filed. They were all combined. We had the trial in November of that year. We got the ruling from the district court in March of 16. Then it went to the appellate court, then it went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court takes, other than cases they're required to take by statute, the Supreme Court takes less than 1% of all cases that are appealed to the Supreme Court, and so they get to handpick. They took this case right away. And the reason they took the case, the argument, and the reason it went to the Supreme Court was there's a provision in the open meeting law that with 3 intentional violations of the law, the elected official should be removed from office. In 96, in a case, Claude versus Collins, that occurred. Council members were removed for 3 intentional violations. The legislature in 2003 added the word previous. And the argument through the appellate court and the Supreme Court in our case was, what does that mean? How do you interpret that word as previous? And ended up the Supreme Court didn't, in my opinion, didn't like the outcome, but did the right thing. They didn't legislate from the bench. They interpreted the law as written by the legislature, and they said previous means elected officials, you have to convict them, they get to be told what they did wrong, then you have to do it a second time, and then you have to do it a third time before you can remove them from office, which means you end up having to spend roughly $1 million and 10 to 12 years of court costs before you can remove somebody from office that serves either a 2 or 4-year term. The Supreme Court ruling effectively eviscerated the open meeting law. Now the League of Minnesota Cities, this is the discussion I've had with them. I said, you supported these guys after they were convicted. And by the way, after they were convicted, they submitted their personal legal bills on the consent agenda, then voted to approve the consent agenda, further harming the people of Victoria to the tune of about $150,000. this whole process went with the League of Minnesota Cities. They defended them, and they never went in and said, let's fix the open meeting law and make sure that elected officials count. It didn't happen. Today, the only, because of the Supreme Court decision, if you can pick elected officials, the worst thing that can happen to them, the only thing that can happen to them, is for each violation they're fined personally $300. So if you convict them on 2 counts, they have to pay a $600 fine. By statute, they personally have to pay it, the city cannot pay it for them. That's it. That's all you can do. So they can literally, if you look at the Victoria case, I could go and do any backroom deal I wanted, give my buddies all sorts of contracts, and if you even caught me at it, right, what would happen, right? You could fine me $300 if you caught me at it. Now, I would never do that, but I'm citing that as an example. Because the open meeting law has been eviscerated, right, it's almost useless. So one of the things I'm doing is to change that, to get the word previous out, because of the fact that it destroyed the public's ability to hold elected officials accountable for violating the law. And this is a simple law. This is really simple law. You know what it is? Close the meetings properly, right? You have to tell the public why you're closing the meeting. If you go to closed session, you have to record it, right? When you have a meeting of a quorum, so if you've got more than 3 council members, right, if they're going to meet and discuss, you got to notice the public so the public can attend and watch and witness, right? These are simple things. There's not that much more to it. I mean, there is a couple of other things, but this is how simple the open meeting law is, right? It's just amazing to me that these organizations and these bureaucracies like the League of Minnesota Cities, they didn't want to change the law. They like it just the way it is. And I think one of the reasons is because they run the insurance trust, the trust that all cities pay to defend officials, and I think that's appropriate. Officials should be defended against, because there could be false accusations. But once they're convicted, I don't think they should defend them anymore. But the League of Minnesota Cities runs that insurance trust and makes a lot of money off that trust. They don't want the open meeting law changed because they're going to face a lot more lawsuits, and to them, I think it's, frankly, follow the money. I think it's because they don't want to lose that money. So, other questions?
I'd like to ask everybody, what do you see as the biggest problem in Rockville?
Don't know what it is. Don't know what the problem is. I mean, I hear there's certain water issues. I'm not sure what the issue is. I don't like the 20% tax hike we got. So to me, there's some data that, or some budget things that are.
Before you started informing us, Rick, information, we didn't know anything. They never fed us any information as far as what big issues that they were doing.
Right.
Another thing I always wondered about is, you know, they tell us where they spend money. They spend it here and here and up there. But, you know, there's also money taken in that they don't explain, that it's not as large amount, but there's money being taken in by the city and not explained to us where they got it from. They just deal with it.
Well, those types of things, whatever you're seeing, that would be perfect example for a data request. And any help you need with a data request, I can show you how to write those so that there isn't a charge to you. Because as Tom had pointed out, if you write it in the proper way, first off, everybody knows that almost all data today is stored electronically. You have to specifically ask for the data in the form in which it's created and state the electronic form in which it's created. That way, there's very little time involved. If they want to try and charge you any time, they have to detail out, itemize that, what time they're saying it's taking to get that data. As we know, a data search in electronic form is a very simple search, especially if you know, such as what you're talking about, something, money coming in, that should be easily identified by the finance clerk and be able to be sent to you back lickety-split, no problem. I had turned in a data request for all the annual salaries that were paid out to the 5 para-employees, that's the kind of the full-time employees that the city has. Turned that back in on December 12th. I was giving kind of the runaround, and I showed some people the picture of the piles of data along with these other requests that I had spread out on a meeting room table. 90%, probably 95% of that data had nothing to do with any of my data requests. It's just to overwhelm you, to turn you away, to get away from that. I resubmitted my data request on January 8th for those wages. They were sent back the same day because I was turning it in a different manner. A lot of people don't understand a lot of the wage increases that have been going on here in Rockville. Rockville's wages are way up there right now. I bet our city administrator is probably close to yours. Last year was paid, glasses. I need these things now. Annual salary last year came in at 90, this is just salary. $94,647.42. That's base salary, not including the benefits or anything. There's benefits on top of that. The insurance is paid for at a rate, I forget what rate that is right now, but they get a lot of insurance and para, which is the public employee retirement account through the state. So they're being paid pretty well. So to get the runaround when you're asking for this data, which is their job, is what's most frustrating to me.
I would emphasize that point again, and if you can tailor your data request, part of the problem we had early on is we didn't know the right question to ask. We knew there was something wrong, but we didn't know what. As we would learn more, we could further narrow and refine our questions to specific things. But of course, going into it, you're not going to know what necessarily is that right question to ask. But his point is valid. We ran into the same problem. To give you an example, when we had filed the suits, what they did to make this hard for us, instead of giving us the electronic files that we could search easily, they printed out 13 hard copy boxes, legal boxes, which were about like this, jammed all of the papers in there. They said, here you go, and we had 8 hours to try to search it. We couldn't take it with us. This is the kind of games that they did to keep us, and what we're looking for is needles in the haystack. So how do you search 13 boxes in 8 hours, right? And when you first pick something up, it's important to get some sort of a structure if you're looking at data, because when you first pick it up, you're not going to know necessarily the importance of it. There are a number of times where we went, oh, wait a second, didn't we see that? And all of a sudden, something that seemed innocuous and not important is the piece to the puzzle that you needed. Because what you're really building here is you're trying to assemble a jigsaw puzzle. And so it's important as you go through this process, the more narrow and the native form, you're not going to have to pay a lot. In fact, in most cases, you're not going to have to pay much, if anything at all. In Victoria, we give data out free all the time. If it's something simple and easy, just done, right? We don't get into trying to keep the public away from data, right? And we think that, I believe they have a right to it, so we make it as easy as possible, as long as it doesn't become a big administrative burden or cost burden to the city, right? Because we have a duty to the taxpayers too, right? So there's a way to balance that, I think. But that's a good point. And it all starts with data. If just because you don't know something, I don't know the particulars of your council, I have run into it myself as mayor, where I will give anybody just about anything they ask for, as long as we can. But I've had people come to me and say, we didn't know anything about this, but yet it's been posted on the city website or Facebook page, or letters have gone out, or you've been noticed in the paper. So make sure that you're paying attention to those notices, because quite frankly, how many of us get something in the mail and we just don't really pay attention to it? So you got to make sure that that's not occurring too, right? The fact that you're here today and you're talking about this is absolutely, in my mind, the critical first step. The fact that you guys are paying attention, it's less likely for this stuff to slide through. But if you really think there's problems, right, start looking for the data and start digging through the data to find out if there is. And I'll tell you what, even if there's not, it doesn't hurt to become educated on the issues, whether it's salaries or how your water systems are working or the taxes and how much they went up. Dig into those budget numbers yourself. See if there's spending there that you don't agree with. And come back to the council. I know in our council, I let anybody speak with any question. The previous council, before I got elected, they wouldn't let people ask tough questions, right? As soon as I became mayor, it was like, there are no bars to questions. You have a right as residents to ask anything you want. I would encourage you to go in, if you have questions, simply go into council meetings and ask the questions. Say, I'd like to get an answer.
Let me help you with that one. Most people that have spoke at the council meetings, you understand that at our council meetings in Rockville, there's a public forum. They get 3 minutes to address the council, no two-way interaction, none. And the city administrator will always chime in and say, excuse me, there's no interaction. This is to address the council. So the people come, they say their piece, and they walk out and say, that was a waste of time, they never come back.
He doesn't always say, excuse me, either.
Oh, no, yeah, right.
So I changed that in Victoria. That's not a requirement, right? Council members in Victoria, we give them people 5 minutes, and as mayor, I run the meetings, and if people are not repeating themselves, I'll give them a little extra time, right? And when they go over, I'll say, you know, you're over, please, you know, wrap up your comments. But we also allow council members, and I will respond to questions, right? I will interact with the public. Now, if we start getting into a big discussion or debate, we'll say, okay, now's not the time, we'll schedule that in a work session, or we'll put time in an upcoming agenda where we can have that discussion, because you're not going to have a lengthy discussion in a 5-minute open session. But I would encourage you guys, as residents, to say, we want to, if it's simple stuff, you should be able to get simple answers. And if not, you should be able to ask, I'd like to put this on the agenda or a work session so that we, the public, can understand what's going on, because we have a lot of questions we'd like to get answered, right? I don't want to speak for your council. I don't know if they'll choose to do that or not. I'll tell you that, in my opinion, I've got nothing to hide. And I think residents have every right to have access to their elected officials. So I would always support that. And I should note, I started talking about it earlier, number of work sessions that happened in Victoria, 8 or 10 a year. Since we got our new city manager in March of this year, our number of work sessions went from 8 to 10. We had 22 so far. Literally every meeting, right? I think it's 22. That may not be exactly right. Maybe it's 18. We basically have a work session before every council meeting now. Why? Because there is no more backroom deals. There are no backroom discussions. With the new city manager that was focused on doing the right thing, we have work sessions so the public knows what we're talking about. Because I will not meet with other council members other than one outside of the council. Why is it one? Because every council member, you can talk to one person, it's not serious communications. The reason I only ever meet with one, and that's of course the one supporter of mine, is we do talk about issues, right? But two of us cannot make a decision. It takes a quorum. And then we talk about in the workshops, right, what we talked about, right? And it's literally saying, okay, well, you research this, I'll research that, because it's trying to be more efficient with our time. So 2 council members can talk, right? It's when a third becomes involved in those discussions before council meeting, that's a problem. So you want to look for that. That is a big indicator that something's going on.
Well, Brad, you had something before.
I just wanted to ask, what is Marty's salary compared to Bridget's or Tessa's?
Well, that, you know.
Well, I mean, I don't know, you throw out a number and it's fine, but I have no idea if that's 20% higher than what they make or 10% less than the governor makes. I don't know.
And the reason I say that's interesting because I've tried for other people to get involved. I'm one guy trying to get all this information. I gathered the information. Every city has to have a data practice policy. There's actually 2 policies, one for confidential information and the other one for public information. It's 2 different policies, but every city has that. I contacted a number of the cities I have their data practice policy. I just haven't had the time to submit these data requests to get all this information. Like I say, I'm one person.
Sure.
I had a couple of people that said, oh, I'd be willing to do that. Never heard from them again.
But you understand my question is that I don't know in what context that salary
Absolutely.
sits. So-
Absolutely, and that's why it's first step, find out here. I mean, I've always shared where wages have went here from 2014 till now. I'll guarantee you, there isn't a person in this room that has the same amount of percentage increases as it's been happening here. First off, every year, each employee gets a 3.1% increase,
Okay.
step increase. Then they've been adding 2.5% last year for cost of living on top of that, 2.75% this year. So that's over 5% on just the last 2 years, each year. So, I mean.
But is that that much out of line? I have a friend that works at the granite company, just got a 5% raise.
You got a 5% raise, and
I mean, he doesn't get one every year, but he
Right.
did get one this year, so he's getting the same thing, you know what I mean? It's,
Right.
I need context to understand this stuff.
right,
I'm simple.
exactly.
So I would argue that's the apples and oranges. What the commercial world does is based on the commercial world.
Okay, that's a good point.
The,
That's why I was asking about the other cities though.
Yeah.
I think this is a problem. And I'll tell you why. There's associations of city managers and public servants that work various places. These professions, like virtually any profession, there's going to be bad apples that do bad things. But what I have seen, because I did some of the same research for Carver County, for various cities, because I was comparing what was going on in Victoria prior to the new city manager taking over with what other cities were doing. And I was seeing 8% pay raises, 5% pay raises, and to me, it was out of control. And the group, if you will, it's because nobody's paying attention and nobody was challenging it. As soon as I started challenging it, Victoria went from one person got I think it was an 8.5% raise, another one got a 12.5% raise, and then all of a sudden I started questioning it, and all of a sudden they went down to like 2.5%. So this is why I mean that you have to look at the data and you have to get involved. If you've got data that you don't think is right for your city, go to some of the other cities. They're subject to the data requests also. And I started doing comparisons between similar cities, and that also is illustrative in the sense of how your city compares to others. If you think it's out of whack, compare it to some other cities and see if it is out of whack, right? But this salary and benefits, I don't think public servants should be making the kind of money that the commercial world does because it's taxpayer money.
Fair enough.
And with all of the benefits and everything else, it's a good time to be a government employee. Plus, how many government employees ever get fired? It's pretty tough.
Do you have to be a resident of a city to ask for information,
No.
or another city?
No.
So I could research Richmond and,
Yep.
Any city in the whole state.
You don't even have to be a citizen of the state.
Yeah,
So there's a lot of law firms that get involved in issues, and they use data practice requests as part of that. So.
I have a question regarding the COLA, the 2.7% rate increase. Okay, when every single year there's been some kind of a COLA increase besides the step up to the next level in their pay in the city of Rockville. When there's, with the COLA, do the steps increase the 2.7% all the time with
Yeah, the
it?
steps get increased, the COLA gets applied to step 0, and that automatically increases all the other steps, changes all the other steps. Anytime they apply a COLA, it gets applied to step 0, and then that changes all the steps all the way up to step 11. So each year, all those wages change. Each step 0 to 1 to 2 to 3, is 3.1% increase automatically there between the steps. You understand? The COLA gets applied to step 0, changes all the numbers, each step still stays 3.1%.
So they get their step increase plus the COLA because that's been worked into the system.
That's added in, right? Exactly.
Which
Yeah.
is why somebody who a few years ago started out at like 16 bucks an hour is now close to 25.
This can make a, this can
And
have,
I'm using general numbers here, I don't have exact wages.
Yeah,
I
I
think,
have the data right here.
I think that kind of increase is creating a long-term problem for a lot of cities because of the retirement costs and everything else the taxpayers have to pay. As all of these wages go up at such a steady pace, especially when you look at inflation today of what, less than 1%, right? But they're exceeding that, they've exceeded it every year. When you look, you mentioned the Granite Works, which is close by. Commercial world can do that because they've got a profit motive and they're entirely separate, and they may be able to justify that. But for years, wages were flat in the commercial world, but yet government employees every year, bang, 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 bang. And in the case, like I said, in Victoria, there were some huge increases in there. This is why, over time, as those people spend more time working on the system, the taxpayers have to keep paying more and more into para and the retirement accounts. It's creating, I think, a long-term problem because more and more of your taxes are going to go to support these folks, right? And it all comes back again to statutory need and the fact that if councils are not paying attention, these kind of pay raises go through because it's a city manager that determines that unless the council steps in. And in my case, where I had city staff working against me for my first couple of years, I wasn't even able to get access. I wasn't asking the right questions because I didn't know to ask the right question. It was so such a difficult situation, if you will. The good news is, I grew a tough outer skin. I'm kind of used to all of the false accusations nowadays. It just kind of rolls off. But yeah, you have to dig in, right? One of the things that we did, that you guys may consider if you think there are issues, is take these various subjects, whether it's water, salary, budget numbers, or revenue coming in. You divide it up and you have somebody do the data requests and focus on a particular element, right? And then you work together as a team to try to pull this all together. That's what we ended up having to do because there's so many different things going on, and you can't, instead of being a shotgun effect, right, trying to do it all, we started taking rifle shots on specific things, and then we were able to put it together, right? And it became pretty apparent once we did this how bad it was. So.
On a different subject, at the last city council meeting, if I remember correctly, it was decided to have a third party look at the water rates and water and sewer expenses, income, all of that, do an audit. Do we know who appointed that third person? Does anybody here know who?
That was done by the administrator on his own.
Okay, so that was done by our city administrator.
Right.
Not a concerned citizen who.
Right, he gave it to David Brown and Associates, which is the city's financial advisor.
All right, so.
In my opinion, not the ideal person to do a water and sewer study. There's better entities equipped to do that, such as Minnesota Rural Water, and even more experts in that field that do much more detailed studies. And I think that's really needed in Rockville because, in my mind, it's very clear in black and white in the wellhead protection plan that the city operates two municipal water drinking systems, the Pleasant Lake system and the Core City system. Core City system has been self-funding for years, no problem. This system here has never made a dime. I can prove that in black and white in all the figures. It's never made a dime. That system here gets hundreds of thousands of gallons dumped every year, pumped. Chemicals put into it, up into the tower. Those chemicals go stagnant because there's not enough use on it. It gets dumped out on the ground, and then they replenish it with putting more water in there. It happens every year.
What
There's
was the
reports to
object
that.
of the two wells over here in the pump house and a mile over
Yeah,
to store the water?
I'm not sure. Let Tootie.
At the same meeting Carol's talking about, actually, the mayor did suggest that they look into using rural water in addition to drown. And I don't know that they voted to do that, but I think the administrator said, okay, I will do that. Right? He said that, but there was no vote. Did anybody do that? Have we?
That I do not know. I'd have to refer that to the mayor. I don't know.
Well, so sometimes we try, or some of them try, but.
There's another fellow that's very much an expert in the field. His last name is Brown. Carl Brown. He goes to cities all over. It's his field. It's his expertise to go in and evaluate systems. And as I've said, we've had 2 water systems and we have really 2 sewer systems. The Core City was, that sewer system was put in, and Vince Schaefer, when he was mayor, he had gotten a 0% loan to get that put in. That system has been paid off. The lake system had over $9 million spent on that, which is still being paid. And when this last rate increase came in, the Core City got a 265% increase on their rates. The lake systems, which are not metered, got a flat increase of $60 per year. Less than $61 per year. On the expensive system that has a huge $9 million debt, that debt is paid for, and we got the brunt of it. I say we because I pay that through my apartments that I still own there.
I typically will not support city managers selecting their own consultants to look at anything in the city. The way that we do it in Victoria is if there's some sort of a study or something else that has to be done, it goes through a competitive bid process, and it's selected and approved by the council, because the council controls the budget, not the city manager. There's an
RFPs, request for proposals.
Right. I will tell you, in my experience, and I don't know the particulars here, but in my experience, there have been a number of problems historically in Victoria where you hire somebody. Think about this for a moment. City engineering or engineering firms that whose business is government, and you hire them to look at something the government's doing. Does anybody honestly think they're going to come back and say you're doing this completely wrong? No, that's where they get their bread and butter from. You need to find somebody that's outside the system to get a true independent review. And I can tell you that we've had a number of studies that, quite frankly, aren't worth the paper they're written on, and it costs the taxpayers a lot of money. And so you got to be careful with these kind of things. You got to make sure and say, is who you're hiring truly independent looking at the issues? And part of that is defining the scope of what kind of questions you want answered, and then making sure that you have data to support that. Now, that doesn't mean that just because somebody does business with cities is going to give you a bogus or a bad report. You just got to pay attention to particulars and make sure that the questions you want answered are answered, and there's data that supports that, so that you know that the end result or the report is reflective of really what you wanted to learn, right? And it's not something else. Because there are a parking study in particular in Victoria was done that was completely biased and not reflective of the real problem, right? And these are the kind of things that you got to go, yeah, that's not really what we wanted to do. So, but I would be careful with these, especially if it's a contentious issue. You got to make sure that you kind of cross the T's and dot the I's. Look at the contract, look at the requirements, right? Look at what is supposed to be provided, and make sure that what is provided is defendable in terms of whether it's salary data, water rates, whatever the case may be. I will tell you, hearing $9 million for a water system, we're in Victoria right now drilling for a new well, and drilling costs us roughly $50,000 a well, each drill spot. We're on our 5th drill spot because we're not hitting the kind of water flow we want. But our well that we've got one that's planned right now, that's only, I think it's like $2.5 million. So to hear a $9 million price tag, I'd really be curious as to where did you come up with a $9 million price tag? Because that's far and above what I see us spending in Victoria. But I don't know if what I'm thinking about is truly an apples to apples comparison. So,
Well, this is a huge, that was a huge sewer project going around this whole lake and another whole lake a little ways away from here.
oh, so it's water and sewer lines in the ground?
No, only sewer, no water.
All right, so that's definitely not an apples to apples comparison to what I was thinking about.
Yeah.
So
A
that could be.
lot of area was covered with that.
Right.
And then all the sewer gets collected to pump from the industrial park. There's a lift pumping station there. All the sewage goes out to the next city, Cold Spring, for the treatment plant, because there's no sewer treatment plant in Rockville.
Shared plant with Cold Spring?
Yeah.
Yeah, so hearing that price tag seems much more reasonable, right? That, because it's not a comparison to what I was talking about in Victoria.
I think Warren installed the 380 sewer ejector pumps, like the little silos,
Yeah.
and those impellers are wearing out or something like that.
Yeah,
So that's-
the lake sewer system is individual grinder stations. It's not a gravity-fed system. They could have now the subdivision across the road, that's gravity-fed into the lift station over here, but then all the rest around the lake, each one has an individual like silo and a grinder station at each residence.
Well, that goes all the way up.
So that's Lena Lane.
And
Lena
The whole
Lane,
area
Road
is
Street.
grinder station.
yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
all of those are grinders.
yeah.
And that's fundamentally different from what we are. We're a metro city, so we're connected into the Metropolitan Council
Yeah.
regional sewer system. Everything in the metro cities is pumped, I think it's down to Shakopee.
Oh,
thing.
wow.
And it's all taken care of in plants down there, but all of the cities connect into that regional system and pump there. So it's an entirely different setup than what you
Yeah.
guys are doing there.
And that's the other reason I say that the core city versus the lake systems is a totally different animal, because all of the core city is gravity fed. There's really no repair bills there. Some sewer cleaning, jetting and stuff at times, but all of the lake system with all these grinder stations, there's a bill every single month
Yeah.
at City Hall. In their council packet, in the list of bills detailed, there's a bill there every month for grinder station repairs.
Yeah, that's just an expensive system.
Yes,
That's
very
gonna
much so.
cost you. You don't have some of the advantages that we have.
Rick, you asked a question before, what do you think the biggest problem, one of the big problems in Rockville is, I think one of the biggest problems is the city administrator we got. He's not a public servant, he runs it more like a dictatorship.
Right.
On 2 occasions I went down there to ask to talk to him about something. His response was, I don't have time to talk to you about it. I mean,
Yeah.
he runs it like a dictatorship instead of a public servant.
And that's been the case with a lot of people. A lot of people have told me the same thing. Very rude. You know, it's been on camera at different times how rude he is, but that's under the purview of the council. The council controls the administrator. You know, when citizens have bad interaction with them, the only recourse you got is to notify your council members. But in most cases, I'd say at least 3 out of the 5 council members, you probably won't ever get a response from.
Right.
And that's very concerning too. The mayor has always responded. Everybody that I've talked to that said they've emailed the mayor or called the mayor, they have communication with them. That's not a problem. And usually Jerry Tipple, the other council member that's kind of open and will talk with you is Jerry. But the other ones, I'm sorry, they just don't reply. And it's like they don't want to hear from the people.
You guys can fix that, it's called the ballot box in November. Right? That's how you fix that.
Coming up.
Right.
Right, that's the only way to do it.
2 of the 3
Right.
that are coming up for election this year are the 2 that work for you, but the other ones.
Yeah, that, if the council doesn't take action regarding your city manager, there's not much you can do. It's only the council that can address that issue, right? And as you as citizens, I would strongly suggest that you speak to your council members and ask them to fix it.
Yeah.
So I have a question. I own a business in town, but I'm not a registered voter here. I live outside town. What can I do to help? If I don't have a ballot, I can't vote this guy out. What can I do to better my interest in tax increases and stuff?
Yeah, stay involved is about all you're gonna be able to do. You moved to Rockville.
Then you'd have a vote.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, we have a lot of people in Victoria, well, not a lot, but we have people that come and address the council who don't live in Victoria. But if they have a business there or do business there, I absolutely let them address the council, express their views, because they are affected by decisions that come out of the council. Right? So you just don't have that vote in the ballot box. So you know what, when you have a city manager that treats the public that way, that to me is a significant issue, right? When I first started asking questions, the immediate response, and I'm not saying this is the case, it doesn't sound like it here, but the immediate response was I was attacked by the council, the local press, and the city staff, because how dare I ask questions? And that's a common tactic when you're starting to look at things that they don't want you to look at, is they want to distract from what you're looking at. They want you to be painted as a rabble-rouser. I was, in fact, called by the mayor an unbalanced radical fringe element. So I kind of like that moniker. I'm kind of proud of that one. And that's how I was described to county staff, county commissioners. In fact, it was years later, a county commissioner told me, yeah, you know how I first heard of you? Yeah, you're that unbalanced radical fringe element. So, but perseverance, right? This kind of behavior, in my opinion, is unacceptable in any public servant, right? I let people come into council meetings who were demanding my resignation because I was fighting the city paying the legal bills of people that had been convicted by a court. And I disagreed with them. I didn't think they were educated in the issues, and they would throw all sorts of false allegations at me, but I let them speak. And in fact, I'd let them go over the 5 minutes, give them a couple extra minutes, and then I'd ask them to wrap up because, other people wanted to speak. It's part of what happens when you're an elected official. You gotta kind of take the heat too. But the symptoms of any public official berating members of the public because you're asking questions to me, is an indicator that you're looking at something they don't want you to look at. Right? And my response and our response in Victoria is the more they pushed back and attacked us, the more we said we're getting close to where we want to be. And we dug more. And sure enough, like I said, it became brutally obvious with the documentation. I'll give you one example because it was just so blatant, and yet they said we were making it all up. If you look at your meeting notes in meetings in Victoria before everything changed, the meeting notes would look, and you read how they closed the session. All of the language on the meeting notes that were published showed that they closed the session in accordance with the state law. They did everything by the book. Then you'd go and look at the videotape, and you'd say, this wasn't even the same meeting, right? They would say something like, okay, we're going to closed session, and they would just leave and go to closed session. But in the paper it said, motion, second, go to closed session to discuss A, B, and C. Well, that wasn't even close. And then when we got the closed meeting minutes, and this was another problem. If you go to a closed session and you tell the public we're going to talk about A, what happened in Victoria, not only did they not tell the public what they're going to talk about, but when they went to closed session, they talked about A through Z. All of the stuff the public had a right to know and hear was all done behind closed doors in a closed session. And the only reason we know that is because we've got meeting minutes that they actually took. And it showed how bad the public was being kept out of the loop. So these are things that when you're asking questions and people are criticizing you or attacking you because you're asking questions, it's like, keep digging, right? Don't take that as an answer. You have every right to that data. and exercise your rights. It's the only way you hold elected officials accountable.
So I have a question for you about that. I like the idea of being able to, instead of a public forum where we go up and state something and we're told to move on, and there are no answers, how do we let our council know that we would like to change that so that our forum can be a question and answer period as well, if we want it to be?
So it's up to the mayor and the council, right? And I don't want to speak for him, and I'm not trying to throw your mayor under the bus who's here, right? That was a choice that I pushed because I was for transparency. And I'll tell you how I got some things approved, even though in my first 2 years I had the defendants and the difficulties. The reason I got some things done, because I went out and got residents, and I would have 100 residents show up in the council's chamber, coming to the podium with their leaders speaking, saying, we demand this, you work for us, we want this change. And that's how I got some things done. It's citizen involvement, folks. If you don't get involved, right, the council's not going to feel any pressure to change. But if you pack a council chamber and say, we want this change, right, because there's nothing that prevents it, then, the council will have to decide whether or not they'll make the change. I want to defend the council, though. You understand that when we go as elected officials, there's a packet, there's an agenda. You can't bring up something new and want to talk about it because the public hasn't been notified that you're going to talk about this subject. So you could have a short, brief discussion, but if you want a lengthy discussion, you need to get it on an agenda item so the public knows it's going to be discussed, and then you can schedule it later. But to have a couple of quick, easy questions answered, nobody argues with that. It's still, at least in our meetings, they're recorded, videotaped, and broadcast, so people can see that.
Well, I think
But you
that's
can't
why it's
expect them,
important,
right?
because it is being recorded, videotaped, and
Correct.
broadcast. When we come before the council and say, we have a concern about this or that, or, an employee, or, whatever's going on, that's recorded, that
Correct.
somebody can go back and look at that and see that there have been a number of times that this has been brought up by the public to the council, and still nothing has happened.
But I'm going to let your mayor speak, but just one point. I want to emphasize again that we've got requirements to the public to notice when you have topics, right? And I'm telling you what I did, but that was my choice as mayor. Everybody can decide whether that's right or wrong for themselves. But in the defense of the councils, they can't have an extended discussion on a topic that's brought up, right? Mayor?
Yeah, and it's Dwayne today, I'm not the mayor, I'm here I'm representing John Clark's law policy, that's why I'm here. My
You
wife-
can't take that hat off.
No.
I guess you're right.
It's on.
Rick, you were on and we created a code of conduct when you were still a council member. And in the code of conduct, the general thought process is you can't have mob rule. And I know that's not intended to be negative today or something like that, but mob rule, like democracy, you have to have input. And I think you're stating it right on. I said, we need to have tidbits, and I think I'll probably have to be a little bit more forceful in saying we do have a little bit, and we ask, I said, if there's some clarification that any of the council wants, you have to ask those type of questions, but then if it's important, get it on the administrator or contact us so we can get it on the agenda. So anyways, now I'm getting back off.
So-
I'm Wayne.
So when people come up, such as the last council meeting, when people come up to the open forum and they talk about the poor plowing on their road, the reason they don't want to call that into city staff is because then nobody ever hears about it. At least if they come to the open forum and state it there publicly where it's recorded, and then others can say, well, yeah, my road hasn't been plowed either, and mine, at least that way it's getting notified. The current situation with the roads is one of the biggest problems that there is in Rockville. There's roughly 60 miles of roads and not enough money to go for it. Well, I keep telling everybody that asks, well, why are we in this situation? Well, you're still paying for a fire hall and city hall. Those bills are still being paid. Well, that money is not available to now go for roads. You'd have a lot more money for roads, but see, the whole consolidation, I had brought this packet here, this was part of the design team, and then all the plans when the consolidation, how it would save taxpayer monies, it's all
right here on the one page, how combining the city governments would save taxpayers by the staff. Each entity was going to be building their own city hall, so you're explaining all that. Well, then right after the consolidation, the EDA was created instead of putting it on a ballot question to let the voters decide, do we want a fire hall in City Hall? No, an EDA was created, built the fire hall in City Hall, rented it to the city, and then just taxed the taxpayers. You know, that is the way those got started, and they're still being paid for today by tax dollars. So all those tax dollars that are going towards those buildings could have been being used for roads if the taxpayers would have had a voice at that time to build something where the buildings were all together instead of two separate buildings. And, you know, most cities our size, you drive around the state and the area, they don't have the elaborate structures that are built here in Rockville. So that's all being paid for by tax dollars. And then increased wages on top of that, and, you know, constant buying equipment that they don't seem to know how to operate. The road crack filling this year. I've had a number of people say, drive down our road. The city public works guys did the crack filling on our road. It's like speed bumps every 10 feet. Now, the same equipment, now they use different equipment here in Rockville to do those crack filling. There's joint equipment that is shared by Cold Spring, Richmond, and Rockville. Being that I live in Cold Spring now, when they did their crack filling this year, I was driving down the road after they got done, I'm like, holy cow, they actually know how to use it. It's not speed bumps. It was done right. So like, it can be done.
I want to go back just for a moment to your comment about going in and speaking. One of the things that we found early on, and literally it helped kind of turn everything around, was I went in and I started speaking out about what I was finding. Lo and behold, there were people in the audience and there were other people there that started speaking, and then word spread. It turned out a lot of people besides myself and the group I led, and in fact a lot of these people ended up becoming part of the group. They didn't know other people had the same kind of concerns. They thought they were the only one. So by going and speaking in the council meeting and talking to others, it found out this is how we literally, in one meeting, I knew nobody, but I went in and spoke about all of the issues I saw related to the open meeting law. That spread, and within a month, I had a meeting in my house with 50 people, similar like this, where we all got together and all of a sudden we're sharing stories, and you're going, well, I didn't know about that, and that led us to where we are today. So going in and talking to your council meeting, getting that exposure to the public, best thing you can do. If you're the only one, then it's only one. But I'll bet you'll find out if it's a serious issue or it's a repeat issue. Other people are seeing the same thing and they thought they were the only one. So one other point too. Before, in May of 15, this same issue with the EDA, that happened in Victoria. I actually, the council at that time had approved capital improvement bonds, or CIP bonds. CIP bonds are subject to a reverse referendum. What that means is if you get enough signatures, you can force a vote, so the people get to decide. And I actually led the effort. The first thing I did was lead an effort on a reverse referendum that was successful. We collected the signatures required to force a vote on the issue. And then they did similar to what he was just describing. What they did is they went into the council meeting and they switched from capital improvement bonds, CIP bonds, to lease revenue bonds. Guess what? Lease revenue bonds cost the taxpayers of Victoria $230,000 more in interest, but they weren't subject to a reverse referendum. And so they avoided any sort of a public vote. And let me tell you, this is why you have to become involved. Now as mayor, we are getting ready to refund those bonds that were issued, right? And we're going to save a lot of that interest money that was going. That $230,000 would be the cost, additional interest cost over the life of the bond. We've had those bonds for 6 years when we approved them, so we've lost 6 years of interest, but we're going to save the rest of the interest by refinancing them now. But one of the things that is interesting about this whole thing, because of these backroom deals, because we put so much pressure and scrutiny on what was going on, that city hall in Victoria was built 6 years ago. And right now, this council that I'm having to deal with, we're already out of space. The IT infrastructure they put in there was 10 years out of date when they put it in. We just found out, because we did it, and there were problems, $300,000 to fix all of the IT. The audiovisual equipment they put in was 1980s technology, and this city hall was built in 2013. The AV equipment's got to be replaced. And I'm also looking into our HVAC equipment for the building. It was never right, it's still not right, and they put nothing in the contract to be able to hold the contractor responsible. So we've spent all that money to build a brand new city hall, and in 6 years we're out of space. The IT has to be replaced, the audio visual has to be replaced, and the HVAC doesn't work. But at least we got a brand new building that we overpaid for. I mean, this is the kind of thing that goes on, and this is one of the reasons why we were opposed to what was going on, because we saw that there's a lot of backroom deals. I'm a taxpayer in Victoria too, right? And this kind of, these are why these open meeting laws and data practice are so important. And it's so important for you to be involved in your government, right? Because if you don't get involved, this is what happens. So I'm almost afraid that here in Victoria, we're going to end up having to build a new city hall in another 5 or 10 years. And to give you an example, a neighboring city, the city of Carver, Minnesota, they just built a city hall, and they've got brand new everything, and they've got a city hall that will last them 50 years. It's a beautiful facility. And they didn't build it out of gold, they just built it right. And if you do it right, you don't have these kind of problems. Now that the taxpayers of Victoria were not only victimized back in 2013, that's when this thing was approved, it was built in 2014, we now have, they're going to be victimized again because we're going to have to do something. At some point, we're already spending money to try to, if you will, band-aid it, right? And at some point, we're going to need another facility. To me, it's criminal. Not literally criminal, but to me, it feels like it's criminal.
This is a little off the data point topic, but are there some kind of guidelines, and I'm not so sure I'm saying it right, but that will guarantee that the administration and council working together can be objective? So there's criteria that says, okay, Stearns County seems to have that, where you have defined ways of being objective rather than looking at something subjectively from your own parochial point of view? Or is that kind of like a utopia kind of thing?
Well, that's an interesting concept, because I brought this up with a new city manager, and we've made changes in the way staff reports used to come to the council. I know for a fact that I voted on things my first 2 years where I was misled by staff. I got a staff report that I think was designed to achieve a specific outcome, and they got that outcome, right? And I know for a fact after that we weren't given the right information, or we were given misleading information to vote a certain way. This is why I take a real hard look at anything staff is doing, and if you will, the bureaucracy. Specific to your point though, what I've done is working, because we've got such a great city manager now that's focused not on politics but what's right for the people we represent. We now in our staff reports require not only what the recommendation is by staff when they do an issue, and we have to rely on staff, but we also require things they look at and discount. So it now gives council members, remember, council members are part-time, a lot of them are working and doing other things. It now gives not only the council, but it gives the public an opportunity to look and say, here's the recommendation, we're going to do A, B, C, but we're not going to do D, E, or F, and they don't go into a lot of detail because it takes a lot of staff time. They just say, we looked at this, but discounted it because of cost, or, whatever the case might be. So at least you have a broader perspective, if you will.
You're evaluating according to specific criteria. Here's the recommendation. Okay, A, B, C, D are the criteria that you need to evaluate and rank.
Correct. The more details, I think, and it takes a little time and a little prep work, and this is, councils rely heavily on staff, right? The more details and specificity that you have when you're going out for a bid for anything, the better it is for the public, right? Because you're better able to define what you're looking for, and in my opinion, you're better able to judge, is this what we want, right? And that, I don't believe in, I don't know if you've heard the phrase, but paralysis through analysis. I don't believe in analyzing things to death, but I think my approach to a staff report that says, here's the primary, where we focus our primary efforts, but here's the things we didn't look at. Because there's been times where I said, I want to table this, or we don't want to vote on this, or at least I've asked the council not to, because I think we need to explore option E more, right? But I think it's not only important for the council, I think it's important for the public. These packets are important. But for those that don't know, think about this for a second. So as a mayor of the city, I get the packet along with everybody else in the public on like a Thursday afternoon, right, for a Monday meeting. Our meetings are Mondays. This packet could be 300 or 400 pages. Do you think I have time to read 300 or 400 pages before Monday's meeting? No, you have to rely on staff, right? Yeah, do I read the staff reports, the summaries? Yeah, I try to get through that. But I can't read everything all the time. I actually have people, I've asked people, look at this stuff, right? If you find anything, call me, let me know, and I'll dig into it, or we'll pull it off, or we'll discuss it, right? I rely on the public to help me help them, right? And that, to me, I think is critical. A lot of these people that were involved in our open meeting law lawsuits are also involved in city activities, right? And they're watching what's going on in city committees and city council packets and planning commission, right? And so I get calls from people that are out there going, hey, we saw this, you may want to look at this, or this doesn't feel right, or I've got questions, right? And that, in my opinion, is how we run a more effective and more responsive city.
Is everybody aware that the Rockville council packets are available usually Friday afternoon or after the close of business on Friday if the following Wednesday is the council meeting? Usually the council meetings are the second Wednesday of every month. So that previous Friday, that afternoon, the council packets are available on the city website, going under the homepage, you go to city council, you scroll over to council packets, go over to the year, and pick your council packet. The other thing that everybody should be aware of, under open meeting law, the council packet and the table copy, like this is a sample of the table copy. And the table copy and the council packet, whatever they're discussing, has to be available to the public. That's what happened back in February that I filed an open meeting violation on, was what they were, part of the council packet was listed right on there, but was not in the packet, was minutes of a meeting that had happened 2 days before. They had already voted on it, and when I had brought that up, after the meeting, I went to the city attorney. I told her, I said, this was not in the public packet. She didn't know anything about it. I told the administrator, which he walked out then. I said, Marty, this wasn't in the packet. He said, well, I'll get you a copy. I said, no, you don't get it. They have to be available to the public at the time you're discussing and voting on the issue. And that's when his response to me was not administrator-like. He told me, Rick, get the hell out of here, you're an ass. Well, that's the type of conduct that is unbecoming of a city administrator. I don't care if the meeting was done or not.
What you're saying is true.
Pardon?
And I was there when he made that comment to you.
Right.
And that, see, when you're right, they don't like the fact that you pointed it out, right? And I ran into that extensively in Victoria. That tells me you're on the right thing. Look, if it's a one-time thing, that's one. People make mistakes, right? Where it becomes concerning is there a pattern of it, right?
Well, there was a pattern because that meeting that had happened 2 days before was a special meeting. A special meeting is any meeting outside of a regular council meeting. A regular council meeting, it was just passed last month, January, when your regular meetings are, second Tuesday of every month. Now, interesting on this particular annual schedule, was they included 5 PM workshops before the meeting as needed, and then another, like the last week of the month as needed, and other council workshops as needed, 9 AM on a weekday morning. Now that, most people do not like to hear 9, I'm at work, 9 AM, and there's discussions. Well, this one that had happened 2 days before is what I was getting at. It was a special meeting. A special meeting has to have an agenda, and that is the agenda. You cannot add to the agenda. Well, that meeting in February, they added to the agenda a few items. That was an open meeting violation. That addition to the agenda happened to be the pay scale that everybody was at the council meeting on December was against. Well, in February, they just added it to the agenda at a 9 AM meeting during the day that got passed, and and normally workshops, never any council action was taken, but this particular workshop, they added that, got it passed, and that's why the minutes weren't available 2 days later.
So that, one of the things I should have probably mentioned that when I said the open meeting law is simple. Every meeting of the council has to be published at least 3 business days. I think it's 3 business days. I think it's 3 business days before the meeting. And a special meeting cannot be changed in terms of the agenda. If you haven't called a special meeting to talk about topic A, you cannot talk about anything other than topic A. You can't modify the agenda, you can't change the agenda. And what you described, I don't think complies with the law. You can't publish a regular schedule where there may be workshops. Every workshop in Victoria is noticed separately when there's a workshop. Because you have to have the topic agenda and it has to be noticed 3 days before. You can't have a blank statement as far as I know, although I didn't look specifically to this issue. Victoria doesn't do it that way.
Yeah.
I don't think you can just say there may be workshops at 5 o'clock before a meeting because where's the topic? You have to tell the public what the topic is, and you can't just have a placeholder, if you will. The same thing goes for meetings on Saturday mornings. You can't notice the meeting that way because nobody knows what the topic is. Now, as far as people working and can't be there at 9 AM, sorry, council can call a meeting for whenever they want to call a meeting.
Well, my concern when I read that these possible meetings could happen at these different times, my concern came up as this. I know, Carol, I think you're on the list. There's a few of us that have turned in a request for notice of any special meetings. And I'm okay with getting an email on that. Do you get yours by email or a letter?
Email.
Yeah. So that's fine. But now I'm thinking, I'm going to have to be more vigilant to watch if there's going to be a meeting, because I don't think I'm going to get that special meeting notice because of the way that language was put in to have these, here, in our annual schedule, we can have a meeting at this time.
Do you guys have a system where residents can sign up for alerts or notices?
Well, you have to turn in a special. It's not anything on the city website that I know of that you actually request. You have to turn in a
Special
request.
request to Marty
Yeah.
and tell him that you would be like to be notified and how you want to be notified, email or
Of
a
any
letter.
special meeting, right?
So
That you want to be on that list and he will send it up. Knock on wood.
12 of them on there currently right now.
yeah, I don't think it's expensive, and the technology exists today to do a simple list server or a system where residents can just sign up and get automatic notifications on subjects that they're interested to, including, that's quite literally, even as mayor, that's how I get my packets today, because I want to see what the public's seeing. So we have a system for the council members yourself. I just use what the public gets.
Yeah, and that's what they get too. I mean, we used to get a separate email with them when I was on the council, and then it got to the point where the clerical clerk had said, well, it's available on the city website. And I was fine with that. That was fine. I didn't need a separate email as long as it was there. I felt better that I knew it was available to the public and to me, the same packet. I always questioned beforehand if I was getting a different packet than what was available to the public.
Yeah, this is something, and I defer to the mayor, but I don't think it costs a lot of money, and it makes it easy for residents to follow what's going on in your city and whatever topic you may be interested in. Right? I don't know if there's a lot of infrastructure, and I mean IT infrastructure that has to go behind that or not, but it makes it easy and defer. You guys have anything like that?
I'd like to address one or two things here, Rick. And that is, I get the same information that the rest of you do. I get it off the internet after close of business on Friday over the weekend, and I read every one of them. It's 150 pages typically, somewhere in that range. A lot of stuff.
Well,
the important thing is, and then I'm on the wasn't the watershed district, I'm off of there, but on the voucher board and all that good stuff. So there's lots of stuff going on. To address the reason that we have it public as to our preferred workshops, and I worked very, very hard to make sure that that wasn't another special meeting. So we're going to have a workshop where the public is invited, and that is always going to be at 5 o'clock, 5:15 on the same night as the city council. So that's why that one is. Now, there's certain times when you have staff that comes in, outside specialists that come in, the 5 of us get together, that's a special meeting. So now we're telling the world, when is that special meeting? And it's going to be a certain day, not that it bounces all over. So that's the third choice. First one is always the second Wednesday of the month. Planning and zoning is first Tuesday. City council second Wednesday at 6. Workshop is at 5:15 at the discretion of the mayor and administrator. And then the third one is, if we have to have a third one, then that's going to be on that specific date now, so that everybody knows that if there is something that's happening, it's going to be at that and that day, at that time, so that they can get mentally prepared. And I think that was the right way to do it. So hopefully, don't be too skeptical about that. There's no hidden agenda.
Well, I'm just hoping that the
That's
special
actually
meeting
good
goes as well.
That's actually good to tell the public this is when we will schedule them.
Yeah.
So long as any time when it's actually scheduled, a packet and a notice is sent out for that specific meeting. Right, then it's fine, right? So you're basically trying to tell the public, when we have these, this is typically when they're gonna be, but when you actually do have one, you do send out an actual packet. Is that correct?
And in the event, this is not a political statement, but transparency, accountability, and citizen engagement. If people heard it when I was running for council and I ran for mayor, still the same damn things. That's 9 years later. So I've been council member 11 years. 11 years, they've all heard it.
So it sounds to me that you're doing the right thing, because you do actually.
I need a little help.
Yeah.
Especially this last time, I didn't get much choice over who they select to be on my team.
Yeah.
This last time around, they did not do a very good job.
So, yeah, I think you're fine as long as you put those packets out, right?
We're losing people. How do we go forward? What do we do to go forward?
Well,
Let's just look at one thing. Okay, like water. Okay, that's a big concern. I'm not involved with water at all because I live on County Road 47. I couldn't hook up if I wanted to. But I got a lot of friends that live in the poor city and those that are on city water and sewer. How do you want to start?
Well, right now, it's waiting for this report to come back from David Drown to see it.
Can we
The
put
benefit of
it
the doubt.
on the agenda that there's somebody from a group of concerned citizens elects this person to do the audit?
You're gonna trust the audit.
Yeah, that would be the council.
You mean a task force to have somebody look over their shoulder when they're doing it?
Well, no,
Yeah.
earlier, it was said that Marty, our city administrator, selected the person, Drown, whatever it
David
is,
Drown, yeah.
you know, to do the audit. Well, they work for the city to begin with, so are they truly going to be, for the people? Yeah.
Yeah, we have to, I think, see what the results are going to be.
It's an analysis, not an audit.
Right, just,
Okay,
And the
sorry.
mayor did say publicly that Marty should get rural water to
Minnesota Rural
also
Water.
do an analysis.
So after the analysis comes back, if people are not happy with it,
No, can we be in on hearing what the analysis says so we know what it says?
Well, that would be posted. I would expect it'll be posted.
I haven't seen it. Rick's been asking me for it. I said, I don't have it. You know, it was supposed to show up a day or two after the
Yes.
council meeting.
He said the
I
next
have not
morning.
seen it.
Yeah, he said the next day,
He
yeah.
said the next morning.
But I have not seen anything.
So it was just my comment that if it was supposed to be there the next morning, and it's really not out there yet, did the results not come back the way he was expecting?
What you want to see?
That was my comment.
Not what I expected, they ain't gonna show anybody.
Right.
Okay, so at the next city council meeting, we have to get up at the open forum and say, where is the analysis from both of these entities or what?
Well, I can turn in a data request for it, but I'll tell you, if it's like the other ones, I may not hear anything for a month.
I know, but we should have had the analysis before they voted to raise the rate.
Well,
I would like to have
that's interesting. That was one point I wanted to point out. As Tom was saying, they rely on staff for a lot, right?
Yeah,
At the December meeting when that was done, this is the actual December council packet. Cody, you're very familiar with these, you used to always grab them.
yeah.
There was 2 sheets. This sheet was laying separate on the table, and this sheet was in the council packet stapled in. This is the one that was online that everybody got to see.
And the one that the task force created.
Right. But anyway, these ones, this one had changing the water rate. This was, it said current and possible. They had the base rate going from $26 down to $23, and the per gallon rate changing from $3 to $5.50. But then that was showing a 5,000 gallon user would only see a $2 increase. Well, the basic math here was even wrong. Now, so you're relying on city staff. So 550 times 5 plus 23 does not equal 4350. Let's make it easy. 5 times 5 is 25 plus 23 is 48. Okay? They're showing 43.50. This sheet had a $5 rate, still saying the same 43.50. But then Councilmember Becker changed this to $7 and still referring to the incorrect 43.50. Now, I'm just pointing this all out because, as you say, the council is relying on city staff. But then, when this all takes place, and a vote happens, and I'm sitting back in the audience saying, is there no common sense here? Does anybody know how to do basic math? It doesn't even add up. You can't increase the rate from $3 to $7 and tell everybody it's going to be a $2 increase, but that's what was happening.
See, this is a perfect example of why I ask residents to look at packets, because they find things like that that I'm not necessarily going to see, or other council members are not necessarily going to see. And that, it sounds like it's just an administrative error in what they did, but it's a significant amount of money for that kind of an error.
Yeah. Because it was also stated earlier in the workshop meeting that the water system was losing about $80,000 a year. Well, fact checking that, I go to the city audit that shows a profit on every level. So,
But one had depreciation and the other one didn't.
well,
With the depreciation.
even including the depreciation, 100% paid for, the water fund was still making money. And most residents don't even realize it, but this system over here has a big debt on it yet. There's no debt on the Core City system. Well, a little bit for the Prairie Industrial. But anyhow, this debt has a whole big debt. It was taken out as a revenue bond. That, there's not enough revenue generated here. So the Core City was paying for that for years, until a few years back, now there's general tax dollars going into the water fund to pay for that water tower debt. Which, at least now everybody's paying it, not just the core city. Because it was a failed development that just didn't happen. Someday, maybe it could get enough people. That's why all the lakes system here are one day going to get on this system because they need the money.
So what do we do to get the 20% gone for next time around? Are we stuck with a 20% increase?
For the taxes?
Yes.
For the tax levy, that will be interesting because come August, the preliminary budget will be starting to work on. So generally, what they start on each year is the previous year's budget.
Right. So
Well,
what do we do to get the
The
number?
mayor's aware that that should not happen this year. They should not start with this year's budget. I've already had discussion with him. I said, I already increased to 19.33%. You know, that's not the number you start with this year.
So that number was pushed by a road that was, I'm speaking, I don't know everything here. That number was based on that one road, right? A road?
If I'm allowed to, it was a large increase that was suggested by not me, but
I know.
others. And then
Over 38, yeah.
1,000,009, then it went down to 1,717,000, but the September 30th deadline for audit says whatever you acted on, we acted on in September,
Yep.
3 against 1. One of them was missing, so 3 voted for the great big one, I voted against it. Then it went down conceptually to 1,717,000, and that was at a workshop, and no action was taken at the workshop, and rightfully so. Then we got to the actual rubber hits the road in December. And then rubber hits the road, there's lots of numbers, a lot of moving parts that night. But the end result, I made the motion, 1 million, my intent was 1,650,000. We were at 1,660,000. I said, we are so damn close, we're so close. But what's triggering it is our neighbors, Main Prairie Township, is got the same half of the road and we have the other half. We have made a commitment when Rick was back on the council, when they have the funding for that one road, then we will match that. So that really is right now about a 4.5% increase from previous years, plus the $200,000 road, a one-time this year. Now, Rick is right on. Where do we start next year? Where do we start next year? The first thing we do is you take that $200,000 off. Is that coming from reserve or is that coming from taxes? The group decided to go with a large tax. I voted against that. No, I voted for that because I was at 1,600,000. Get that road fixed one time, get it over with. But where do we start next year?
Where do you want to start?
At the 1 million, wherever 4% took us last year, not at the 1,600,000. It's going to be somewhere where we were last year, 1,400,000, 5% increase. That's where we were at this year. So that's the starting point.
So when do you get involved to get that put, I mean, when do we start our voices up?
August is when they come in with the
Staff puts that together.
Yeah.
City staff puts together the budget with each department, and then they present that to the council, and the council looks at it. Because September is a deadline that each government unit has to report to the county their preliminary budget for the year. Nothing can be higher than that amount.
So that number then is determined by a vote of the council.
The preliminary and the final, and yes, and there's a truth in taxation, TNT, which is generally always on December. That's where we have a public hearing first, so that we all hear you guys. I think we all heard you. Some of them just didn't hear it as correctly as I did. I heard it right.
I think most of the public that was there kind of got the sense that there's at least 2 people that were on the council that wanted the full 38% increase. I think everybody's pretty aware of that. They did not want to lower it. They figured we needed to go with that full amount. But in my opinion, being on the council and serving, it was wrong, just like I spoke at the public forum that night. it's wrong to have $460,000 designated for roads without a detailed engineered plan estimating the costs of each road that you were planning to do. Because now you're just throwing all that money in there and it could be used for any road. So that was my opinion.
Wasn't there previously money designated for roads a long time ago, and we don't really know where that went?
Oh, most of the money got spent in 2018. When I was on the road trail committee, if anybody remembers back in 2016, there was a 25% tax increase proposed with that 2017 street improvement plan. Well, us on the council said, no, that's too big. That was a $3 million bond that would go on for 10 or 15 years. That was a big increase for a long time. So anyway, we voted that down. We started the road trail committee, the RTU committee. I was chair of that, and we said collectively as a group, what's wrong here? Why can't we get these roads done like a township? So there was two of us that got together and we met contractors right on Lake Road here, down at 47 and Lake Road here. And we got an estimate, or a quote, a proposal for the section of road that was in the city engineer's report. Well, when that report came back, that proposal, and it was a fraction of the engineer's report, we said, something's wrong here. They estimate $500,000 and we can get it done for 200. You know, something's wrong here. So then I kept in contact with a couple of the low bidders. One of the proposals that came in, I kept in contact with them. They're no longer in business, they got bought out. That was Tri-City Paving. And I said, well, is there a discount, you know, if we did more roads? Well, if you did this much, it'd be this much discount, volume discount. I said, well, where's the next break point? So we got to that next break point. We did all the roads that were planned in 2017 in their street improvement plan, and we didn't have to assess anybody. We didn't have to take any bonding. We paid for it cash, and we got all these roads done. So that's where a lot of the money went. There was so much money that was being put aside. In the council, or in the tax levy budget each year, there's been $250,000 addition put in for roads for a number of years. I don't even know how far it goes back. Back when Hagan was mayor, they knew they needed money for roads, so they would have been putting away that $250,000. Well, saving this money and not doing the roads isn't doing you any good. You're not getting anything on that money. The road cost is going up. Well, luckily, oil prices had come down, so we got a big bang for the buck. Got a lot of roads done, and I think it worked out really well. So there's ways to get around having to pay these expensive engineer estimates because they get paid on the estimated cost of the project.
Is there gonna be a road, long-term plan done?
There is a long-term plan, and that was one of my data requests.
Okay.
That was one of my data requests, to see those road plans. Now, anybody that came to the special council meeting that was here in the other room back in September, November, whatever it was, Judy, you remember when we were having that meeting over here?
Yeah.
And Brian Herbert was holding that paper up. He was reading all these numbers of what all these roads would cost. I still can't get a copy of that paper. The administrator said he has no knowledge of it, and I should ask Brian Herbert. Well, that's not my job, that's his job as the responsible authority to give me that data. That was a special council meeting, it was posted and everything, so.
That was the same 2015 report that he had, right?
Well, that's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see that actual report. And he even stated that the RTU committee has been meeting regularly. I've asked for all those minutes. You know when the minutes stopped? When I was done with the meeting.
Same thing on our road over there, short distance, 1 mile or something, and they come up with a bid of $200,000. One of the people went and got their bid, and it's on 150, 167. So where are they getting these blown out figures?
Well, you know you're not gonna get a road until you're gonna agree to water, right?
Which is another
You know you're gonna,
contention.
that's gonna happen. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. You're not getting a road until you agree with getting the water, because, and one council member had even stated he's currently a council member, he wasn't at that time, during a bus road tour going around, and the issue was brought up. Well, Pleasant Road, we know it needs to be done, but, you know, they don't want to get the water. His comment was, hey, you have the authority to do it. Put it in and send them the bill. So, hopefully it doesn't go that route.
Maybe the public should know who are the council members that are on the road committee.
Well, right now, it's Brian Herbert is the chair, and Don Simon is on there.
But those are the people that need to be nudged.
I've asked for each meeting minutes and the data, and I got none. They stopped when I was done with the meeting.
Those meetings should be publicized too.
Yeah, it should be publicized, and as best of my knowledge, I asked Brian first, when's the last time he had it? He said it's been several years, so I don't know where you're getting that information, because as far as I asked Marty, the city administrator, that when's the last RTU? I missed the one that we had for a tour in the spring of the year. We played a planning and zoning RTU, and the city council on a tour to drive the whole 6 mile square, and I was at another commitment, so that was supposedly the last one that was a formal RTU committee that I'm aware of, but I haven't seen anything.
Yeah, well, that was just from a data request that I had, because Brian had stated over here, Judy, do you remember him stating that they meet regularly and they have a plan? And he was saying that this document is a living document, it changes all the time, you remember all that?
I don't remember
But
that.
they're aware of
But
the open meeting,
it's a 2015 document.
Folks, I've got another commitment, so I need to slide out of here.
Thank you for coming.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Again, hopefully, some of what I shared, some of the experiences are helpful to you guys, right? And I would leave it with just one thought, right? We, the residents of these states, we need these laws, right, so that we can have an effect on our government, right? And everybody should support these. These are not partisan issues. This is really as simple as good government versus bad government. So use these tools, right, get information and get involved, right? The more you get involved, you'll find out, you'll be able to get change made. So I appreciate you taking the time and listening.
Thank you for coming up.
You're welcome.
Thank you for taking your time.
I'm available. I'll leave some cards with Rick if you have any questions. Here you go. I really do believe in these laws, and should I get elected to the Senate, I will change, or I'll do everything I can to change the open meeting law so that if elected officials are violated, they're removed from office, because I don't think you should serve if you violate that law. I feel very strongly about that. The damage that was done to Victoria after the fact, in my opinion, was quite substantial. That's why we need that kind of removal clause. So again, thank you. If there's anything I can do to help, please don't hesitate to give me a call. All right?
Thank you.
Good luck, Mayor.
And everybody can help him by going to his, I'll give you the links, and at least, view his sites and share some comments on how he helped in that.
I didn't come up here for a political event. I came up here because I believe in good government, right? And I thought maybe some of my experiences may help you folks. So, all right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.